Welcome to your chapter 2 of your human geography text. I've actually pulled up the PowerPoint for myself so I can kind of outline some of the content that's going to be most important to understand as you read through the text. So if you want to open that up with me, we can kind of go through it together. So this chapter here goes through cultural practices and culture itself. So we get to learn a little bit more about what is culture. So as we can see, some of the first pieces that get brought into is folk culture. What characteristics mark a cultural practice, such as folk culture, such as pop culture, space, roles. Again, you kind of Dr. Graves is bringing in that system of using the force. How do we, observe a landscape? When you walk into a place, you start looking into the location. What are the things that you observe? What are the first things that you want to discuss and that you want to know more about? So, as an example, some of the things that I thought was kind of fun that he brought in is he brought in, food, especially for regional pieces. So he brought in, the ideas of hot sauce. That we have different hot sauces that represent different cultures. So when you go to the grocery store, there's all these different hot sauces and flavors that have different types of chilies. But if we think about it, it really has a lot of culture, that has been attributed to that because those hot sauces have chilies from a certain location that may have a particular recipe. So people who travel, around the world, it's like home. They're looking for something that brings them back to that taste. And maybe that maybe there's a spice or a recipe of something that you really, really that reminds you of your home or yourself culture in that piece. Um, Moving forward, he brings in also looking at folk regions and looking also at music. I think music is really, really interesting when it comes to geography because we think of geography as just being a place and space, but music does have that. When we talk about where jazz comes from, and understand that it came from the South after the Civil War when all of these instruments were left over, and at that point, a lot of the then freed slaves were able to gather some of those instruments because they didn't have any value, and then they began writing music, and then that became really the beginning of the jazz age, America's true music. Moving into further down in the line, we can look at regions. The Bay Area is known for Green Day. Looking down into Long Beach being sublime, looking at the Motown sound, the beach, the surf scene. These are all regional pieces that have this folk landscape, and that people can identify. They when you hear sublime and you hear what they're singing about, you're thinking of Long Beach, and you think of a certain type of group of people, or even really to make it more stereotypical in that sense, like the Valley Girl or the Valley person, and the way that they speak and they nodding their head. It's just very interesting because we can attribute these pieces to the location. Um, then moving forward, Dr. Graves really spends a lot of time looking at the characteristics of architecture. I'm not going to be asking you a ton about architecture, but architecture is really interesting in the cultural landscape because obviously ranch-style older homes, people, brick and mortar, you build those things to because of the design or style that you like. But at a certain point, the Sears and Roebuck catalog, which is Sears, used to be able to buy homes, and they were kit homes. They would be delivered to your home, pre-done the walls, and you just kind of snap everything together. And that really started this integration of design. And you could buy Spanish style. You can buy the Yankee style. You can buy even the Cinderella style home, which is predominantly known in Southern California. That's the one with the gingerbread cookie outline. So we have these very distinct home styles that integrated, especially moving into Los Angeles. So we do have these different themes, and those themes do reflect a cultural landscape. So when you think of like craftsman styles, or maybe the Cape Cod home or the New England home made out of brick, it's because those areas are rather cold, and so you wanted something that's very insulated that'll keep the house warm. So these designs of homes actually did have a purpose, but then as you kind of moved west and moved into Los Angeles, especially in the early 1900s through the 50s, people picked homes and designs because they liked it, not realizing that it had really a cultural influence, which is kind of interesting. So again, he spends a lot of time with that. I'm not going to ask you to memorize every type of home, so don't worry about working through all that. But you do look through it because I think it's quite interesting. Because if you think about the landscapes that you live in the location that you are, what type of influence do these home and cultural icons have? He then wraps up with music, which is actually quite a large passion of myself. I really do enjoy listening to all types of music and understanding, well, what influence do those locations have, where it came from, where it is. He also is an integrated YouTube videos where you can sample some. You'll do something similar like that into a discussion later on. Then he brings in sports, sports economics, things like that. We don't think of sports teams as being part of a cultural landscape, but then if you start thinking about it, it really is. Think about a certain sports team, Dodgers, Raiders, things like that. People buying the stickers, the jerseys, things to go with it, the flags that hang in front of people's homes. You know, being involved in a certain sport as a spectator is part of a cultural landscape. It is part of a cultural identity. It's a group of people that believe and agree. They may not even know each other, but they come together to these games, sit next to the same people, cheer on their teams, and it's really, really interesting, as a geographer to look at that, to go to a Dodger game and see the diversity of people that are cheering on the team. And the Dodgers have changed players every year. I mean, it's very hard to keep one player on for a long period of time, but it doesn't matter. They're cheering on the name of the Dodgers, and that's really part of that idea of fandom. And so it'll kind of go through that as well. But what I really wanted to kind of summarize real quick is that when we look at the cultural landscape and what is culture, it's really something that defines your heritage. It defines who you are. We'll move farther in the semester when we start talking about ethnicities, race, nationalities, and what's really the most and better appropriate way to understand those values. But really, what I want you to kind of walk away with here is that, well, when we talk about a cultural identity or a cultural influence or a background, what is that? What inspires you? What inspires yourself? Inspires your family? What traditions? What music? What sports? What food? What spices? What are things that take you back into your family and that are very important? Um, the holidays are always a very interesting and exciting part of culture. Is that when you go to different people's homes for the holidays, well, what cultural influences? What spices? What types of tamales? Were they wrapped in grape leaves? Are they wrapped in corn husks? What type of meats or cheeses or spices? And those are all part of that cultural landscape. And when you start looking at it and start asking those questions to learn more about it, you'll find it's a lot of fun to really kind of see what our landscape and people are about. So enjoy this text, and we'll talk soon.